opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. Question now is that Clause 2 stand part.
Mr. Chair.
Paul Goldsmith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This Clause 2 relates to the commencement of the bill, and it says that the Act will... Well, when you give me the courtesy of some quiet, I will continue. This Act comes into force on the day after the date on which it receives the royal assent. Well, brilliant. I suppose the first point I'd make is when, in reference to royal assent, it is important to pay tribute to the Duke and the Duchess of Cambridge, who are here in New Zealand with young Prince George. And I'm sure, there's no question, I'm sure that we all here in this House hope that they had an enjoyable time with the Plunkett kids, and no doubt relaxing and turning to this broadcast, we welcomed them to New Zealand. And many arrangements have been made in the course of their visit through electronic transactions, no doubt contracted over the internet in the age that we live. And it's interesting to contrast that with the Duke's grandmother when she first came, 1953, when most of the details would have been managed by letters. Now, in terms of the commencement, I'm suggesting that it comes in a day after the date on which it receives the royal assent. Now, the important point here is that I am not suggesting, and have not suggested, and nobody else, I won't accept any suggestion from anybody else that I have suggested that this would be a retrospective bill or come into effect retrospectively, because I don't agree with retrospective legislation unless in the most extreme cases. For it's such a sound principle that people should have certainty as much as possible about the laws in which they are to operate. And from certainty comes predictability, comes confidence, comes investment. And so I have no truck with those who would argue that this bill should be introduced retrospectively. I think it should definitely only come in on the day after it is signed, and the force should not be applied going back at any point. On the same token, though, I also, Mr. Chair, I don't think that there's any argument for, but I considered at great length, whether we should delay the introduction of this bill or the commencement of it in terms of coming into force, say 1 year out after it had received the royal assent, because there was some thought given as to whether we needed to give the business community the opportunity to prepare for this change in legislation. Well, no, it's a very legitimate question to ask. You don't want to ram change through soon enough. But my conclusion after thinking about this was that this legislation can't come soon enough, because at the moment we're in a period of uncertainty. So people don't know exactly. At the moment, we're not sure exactly what an electronic communication means when it's received by an offerer. Is it when he or she receives the email, or when it's in its inbox, or when they open it up, or when it arrives in the server? If there's a gap between the arrival and the server, and similarly for text messages and other messages. So it may well be that it's best to include a definition of receipt. And these are the sorts of circumstances that we were considering and amending in the bill. However, yes, but the point I'm trying to make, Mr. Cosgrove, is that I don't think it makes sense to delay the introduction of this for a year, given the fact we had an episode in February this year when Telecom cancelled the passwords of more than 60,000 Yahoo extra email accounts that it believed were compromised following a cyber attack. And so we have to be very concerned, we have to be cognizant of the fact that people weren't able to access their accounts for several days in that instance, and that was just one instance. I could refer to many others. And though presumably the emails had arrived in the server, but they weren't available. And so it's that area of uncertainty that this legislation is hoping to achieve, and that's why, in my view, it doesn't make sense to hold off for a year, but rather to focus on bringing it in the day after the royal assent. Now, I did give some thought, Mr. Chair, as to whether or not it would be appropriate to have the Commencement Act come into force on the 20th of September. I could, Mr. Chair, I did give some thought.
Paul Goldsmith.
I did give some thought as to whether it should commence on the 20th of September. But and the thinking was that this could be a point of change, or it could be a point of continuity. So after a while, I thought, well, the 20th of September is an election day, and there will be a lot going on there. That wouldn't necessarily make sense to have it starting on the 20th of September. But then another opportunity, I thought, might have been the 15th of January. But that, I understand. No, I wasn't. But if you'd like me to, I could. But the problem with the 15th... The problem with the 15th... Mr. Chair...
They are being rather noisy, aren't they?
I'm trying to concentrate on... I'm afraid I've lost my place. I might have to go back. It was a question of retrospective legislation. I don't agree with that as a general principle. And so what I wanted to say, Mr. Chair, is that I had considered it commencing the day after royal assent, and that's where we fell down at the moment. And I'd just be interested in the views of the rest of the chamber. Thank you.
Oh, you drew the short straw.
Mr. Cosgrove, Mr. Chair.
Have we finished?
Mr. Chair? Mr. Chair.
I do see the
I'm
member.
seeking the call, Mr. Chair. Very enthusiastically.
I call the honourable member, the Honourable Chris Tremaine.
Oh, thank you, Mr.